Geez,
Hello.
could that have been any more frustrating?
It couldn't have been any easier. Okay, we'll see if anybody else comes in, but this this interview will be posted. It's right now being actually posted live on YouTube, and then we will somehow post it on that Facebook event as well. But meanwhile, let's get started. What do you
All
think?
righty.
How much time do we have, Leah?
Is whatever you need.
Okay, so I
Let's
hope you
just
have
do this.
questions
I,
for me.
I was gonna try and take people's questions and but unfortunately,
It's not
um
I just have to guess what they have to ask.
all right, yeah, we usually do pretty good amongst ourselves, so let's just chat it up like we normally do and forget
Normally, I
about the
like to hear what's going on
complications
with
of
you.
technology.
Normally, I like to hear what's going on with you, but this time you want to hear what's going on with me.
I think
Israel.
everybody wants to hear what's going on with you. So let's start with October the 7th. Tell us what it was like. Oh, and then just let me just say this. For me, it was nighttime. It was in the middle of the night, and I was having all of a sudden out of nowhere an attack of insomnia. Yeah, I was actually on Facebook and I saw several of my friends in Israel posting that you're being attacked, and various different terrorist attacks. And I was
Oh,
like, okay. And so many times we see this and it happens so many times that I think you can kind of say, well, it's a way of life and okay, just another attack. But I managed after a little while to finally fall asleep. And then, of course, by that time, everyone in Israel was aware this is not business as usual. This is
right.
not just another attack, but that it's much more orchestrated and much more severe. And so then reality began to set in. So take that and tell us what it was like for you all as all of a sudden you were realizing that this was much more than what you thought, because I heard a number of people comment how this was like Pearl Harbor, or I think even more like a 9/11, where even in 9/11 for a while we didn't realize what we were really experiencing until later. So, and with that, I turn it over to you.
Okay. Well, of course, the events of October 7th happened on a Saturday, on a Shabbat, and not only a Shabbat, but also the holiday of Simchat Torah. Ironically, the happiness of the Torah is the happiest day of the year, one of the happiest days of the year for the Jewish people. My wife and I took the opportunity to go and visit our son who lives up in Har Bracha, which is a relatively small Jewish community of about 200 or 300 families, or maybe 400 families, I'm not sure. In the center of Samaria, he lives Har Bracha, the Mount of Blessing, which is on Har Grizim, which is Mount of Grizim, which is just by Nablus. So we were there as a regular. We often go there for Shabbatot or for holidays. And after the early morning prayer that my son and wife and I participated in, the leader, the mayor, if you will, of the community walked into that synagogue. There are about, I don't know, 3 or 4 synagogues in that community. And he said, listen, everybody, there is a state of emergency in Israel. There was a big attack in the south, and maybe about 100 people were killed. So everybody who is on the emergency response team in our community is requested to now go to your spot where you're supposed to be when something like this happens. When
Hey,
anything,
get on. How far away are you from where that was happening?
we were in. Let me share my screen here 1 second. And I'll put up a map. I like doing this. Second.
A lot of folks in the States don't realize just how small Israel really is.
Right. So this is how small Israel really is. Actually, Israel is a little bit bigger than what is being displayed on my screen. But let me hold on a second. Like that, and let me give you a picture of it. No, that's not good. I want to get rid of that 1 second. There we go. This is Israel. So let me quickly draw you the map of Israel. We start here in Tel Aviv, go north up to Haifa, then up to the Lebanon border. This is the Golan Heights over here. This is the Sea of the Galilee. This is the Jordan River. This is the Dead Sea. And this is the Arava Road, which goes all the way down to Eilat, which is down here way on the south. This is the road and the border between the Sinai and Israel. And then we go up a little bit further up, and boom, we're back in Tel Aviv. This is the West Bank, also known as Judea here on the bottom, and Samaria here up on the top. Here in the middle, this star is Jerusalem. And this is the Gaza Strip. Gotcha? This is where I live, and a little bit towards the bottom here of Judea. And this is where I was spending Shabbat, holiday, near Nablus in Har Bracha. So between Har Bracha and the Gaza Strip is pretty darn far. You catch that?
How many hours would it take you to drive from one place to the next?
If you want to drive from, let's say, from Har Bracha, here we are. And if we want to drive to, we can't get into Gaza, but let's say we drive instead to Kibbutz Nir Oz, which is one of the kibbutz.
That's one of the ones that was hit so hard.
Yeah, that was a little bit more than 2.5 hours.
Okay,
That's what we're talking about over here. Yes. So where we were in Har Bracha, they said, okay, people, like I said, who are on the emergency response team, we're not expecting anything to happen here, but just in case, ordinarily they have people from the emergency response team walking around with rifles, with their M16s. But in this case, they told them, everybody come, take a vest that you can put more ammunition in, and it's also a bulletproof vest, and take also a helmet, and continue to walk around the community. Those of you who are in the army and are on a break from the army, call your bases and see if they want you to come back in. And the rest of us should just try our best to celebrate the holiday with as much joy as we can. And that's what we tried to do. On Saturday night, when I turned my phone back on, I saw about 150 WhatsApp messages from my own community. I live, like I said, down here near Hebron, about 2 hours drive from where we were. And over there in that community, there was an alarm that went off. And so that got everybody all worried. So they stopped the celebrations, and they told everybody, turn on your phones, and they told everybody, go to your houses and be careful. But that was what was going on in that Shabbat. So for me and my wife and my family and the whole community where we were staying, it was calm until Saturday night. Then Saturday night we drove back home, and the war started, for as far as we were concerned.
Mm. So, I guess just speak from like the relive it as a person. What were people saying? How did it unfold personally?
Yeah, you have to understand, as Orthodox Jews, we do not access phones or computers or any other kinds of digital or electronic gadgets.
Which your enemies knew.
No. The people who are in charge of something, if they are on guard or something like that, then they do keep their phones on. But I personally did not have any task that day, so I didn't turn my phone on. Since then, I will tell you that my wife keeps her phone on every Shabbat, just in case something happens. Now, that doesn't mean that we take our phone and if you see me during the week, I'm always with my phone checking my WhatsApps. Unless we hear some sort of an alarm, we're not going to check our phone. So that's the way it was for everybody there in that community that I was at. So during the Shabbat, we were trying to hear if anybody who did have their phone on and was following the news, tell us what's going on. But we realized there was really nothing that we could do. Now, again, my family was all pretty much accounted for. I knew where everybody was. So I wasn't afraid that somebody was down there in the south. Other people, I have, like, for example, friends who were down there. I'm sure that as far as they were concerned, things were problematic. Not to mention that a number of the people who were killed on the first Shabbat were heroes who weren't even there in the south, but they heard that something was going on. They grabbed their personal weapons and they went down to engage, to see what was going on, and if necessary, engage with the terrorists. And that's exactly what they did. And that we only found out about afterwards, of course. I had no idea what was going on when things were happening then.
So, I was at a place last week and they had the posters of all of the people that are believed to be held hostage right now,
Yes.
240, which we now know it's actually 239 because one of them was identified, an elderly lady. She was identified recently as having been killed on the 7th.
Yes.
A lot of those people that have been abducted were actually from the music festival that was going on. And I saw a video that the IDF released that when they went into the music festival, and it looked like the people had been corralled into a small place where they were all slaughtered. And then I'm ascertaining from seeing those posters and that video that they must have been separated. Some were taken and some were killed. Do you have any information on what actually happened there? And that was in Oz, right? That kibbutz.
It was near the kibbutz Re'im. In those areas down there are some kibbutzim, which are gated communities, but in between the gated communities, there are spaces. So they used one of those spaces, just like similar to Woodstock, a place to have a large, they called it the Peace and Love Festival, a music festival, yes. Now, I don't know which video you're talking about, but obviously a video like that, it looks like they got a lot of people over there, but there were over 1,000 people at this event, probably thousands of people at the event, and people started running away. Some ran for their cars, some ran at the same time, just before the terrorists started to come in with their automatic rifles and started shooting at people. From Gaza Strip, they shot missiles. So people hurt. So they started to run for cover. So some of those people ran in, for example, in those areas, the bus stops are actually anti-missile shelters. So they ran in there, but then there were hundreds of terrorists there, armed terrorists over there. So if a terrorist saw a shelter like that, a bus stop like that, so they ran there with a bunch of their friends and they started shooting up the people inside the shelter. Other people ran for their cars. The terrorists made sure to block the roads from either side so that nobody could move. And so they just drove on the road and shot up the cars that were parked at the end of the road, at the sides of the road.
I saw pictures where they had actually set some of those cars on fire and burned people alive.
To death. Yes. I'm not an official spokesman over here, but the little that I've heard and repeated it again and again and again, I could just keep on talking about the atrocities that we've seen over there. Over 1,000 people were killed in one day, in both in that music festival and in people's homes in the kibbutzim in the area. Not only the kibbutzim in the area, there are cities near there. The city of Sderot, very well known, very close to the Gaza Strip. The city of Ofakim, much further. But there were dozens of people killed there that day. And then they started shooting. There was an army base. There were a few army bases that were overrun. So it took the Israeli army a few days to verify that there were no more terrorists in Israel proper. But unfortunately, many of them grabbed Israelis, some children, some injured, some Holocaust survivors, 80 years and older, and they brought them on motorcycles and cars back into the Gaza Strip, which they were able to go back in because they came out, because with tractors, they pushed down the fence between the Gaza Strip and pre-67 Israel. So it was just a terrible, horrific terror attack that Israel immediately saw that they had absolutely no choice but to declare this a war and to start fighting back. And that's what we've been doing since then. 6 weeks.
Have they reached any conclusions about how this could have happened? The breakdown in intel, how did they get in?
That is a question that immediately, of course, is on everybody's mind. And everybody in Israel says, we're going to wait until we finish this war, and then we'll start asking the questions.
That I wish more people did that, but the media just loves that space in between. And there's so many people that draw conclusions and point fingers and all of that in that space in between. And then the media doesn't do it any justice after, once everything comes out. You don't know. But they very, I don't know, cleverly use it as a time to tear down the image of the person that they would like to see weaker.
Yeah. So Israel in general, in spite of the westernization, if I may, over the past few years and decades, in situations like this, we all remember that we are one family and we come together. And that is what we've been seeing in the past 6 weeks. Just prior to this, there's been much civilian strife in Israel, the left against the right, if you will, and other ties. But as soon as this happened, that all flew away right out the window.
That's
and
wonderful.
even though today there is still an opposition in the government, there's the national government. So one of the main parties in the opposition joined the coalition, joined the government, and others didn't. But even those who aren't joining the coalition, they are not pointing any fingers, and they are not behaving as an opposition. They are behaving as a loyal opposition. And right now in war, we just shut up and win the war.
So with all of this going on and the unifying that's taking place, and I understand a lot of what was creating the division. Of course, Ari Fold took me around in 2018 and we discussed a lot of that then. And, he took me to that park just outside of Gush Etzion where those 3 guys kidnapped those kids and
Yes.
where their bodies were found. And in that park, you have all of these strong political statements made by all of these different politicians throughout the years.
Yes.
And, Ari it's much like what we're seeing here in America, where they say one thing and then they do something completely different. And now that I'm in an elected role, I am, it's an education and quite an experience on how you can totally set out to do something, but then all of these different influences and forces come in, they create all this chaos, and
Yes.
and then you're like, okay, what just happened? It didn't go the way you wanted it to. So leading up to all of this judicial reform, or is that on the table still, or is that kind of on the sideline with everything?
Everything is on the sideline.
Is this actually creating a will to, and the eyes opening up, a sobriety, if you would, so that this needs to happen so that we can be stronger and more able to protect ourselves? And if so, speak a little bit about all the protests that people have been seeing, but because they're not super familiar with the culture and being on the ground there in Israel, aside from what the media would try to say, far right, extreme, blah, blah, blah. Speak to that a little bit.
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Sorry, I kind of spaghetti thought on you and went in a bunch of different directions.
Before the war, there were many anti-government protests and demonstrations going on, and from time to time some pro-government demonstrations as well. But as soon as the war started, then everything was off the table. Everything stopped. Everybody said, okay, we'll pick this up later. In fact, one of the major anti-government protest organizations, ad hoc organizations, decided we are now going to channel our strength to the war effort.
Now, explain to Americans what you mean by anti-government protest.
Quite simple. Even though the Israeli method of government is different than the United States method of government in some ways, but it's pretty obviously that you can see that if the president wins, if the president is a Democrat, then the government is a Democrat and the opposition is the Republicans, or vice versa. So it works a little bit differently in Israel because we have a multi-party system, but it doesn't matter. Right now, even though the government is made up of about 6 parties and the opposition is made up of about 5 parties or 4 parties or something like that, nobody is saying anything except we have to win this war. And we're going to win this war. That's it. You're not used to hearing something like that because things aren't as critical and as life urgent as a war. The last war they did, what's the last war in America? The Falklands or something? People went to, you were there, but who knew from something like that in the United States? It was very away. Was it 5,000 miles away? 1,000,000 miles away? Could have been the same thing. Here in Israel, it is an hour away, and everybody, over 50% of Israelis have already volunteered to bring care packages to the soldiers who were waiting when they were waiting to go into Gaza. Today, they're already in Gaza, so many of the soldiers. So people bring them to the rear units all over. My wife and I, we volunteered to pick trees in orchards because the regular workers were mobilized. So the whole country is like that. It's just one big volunteer fest. And it doesn't matter if you're religious or not religious. Everybody is just as one person, as one heart.
It's like one family.
Right.
And like when you were taking me around, when I was there in the spring for Pesach, it had been, because of COVID, 5 years since I had been able to come to Israel. And in that time, I've been riding the wave that America is on in our society, and coming, and I remarked to you as you were taking me around, ah, it was like a breath of fresh air. This is what it's like to be in a society that's unified, that loves one another, even though you have differences and strong differences at times of opinion. And what the media would portray as such a deep rift, and but being there on the ground, and it you genuinely, nobody wants to hurt the other person, nobody wants anything bad to happen to the other person, and when something bad does happen, you come together and you mourn.
Right.
The last time that I can remember us mourning as a nation was with 9/11.
Right.
In a community, I would say we had the Mother Emanuel shooting happened, but that abruptly stopped when politicians hijacked the community coming together and used it for political expedience.
Very sad.
So anyway, I am off on a rabbit trail, but so let me get back focused. What does winning this war look like? And do you perceive that this war could in fact grow, and other like Yemen and Hezbollah and Lebanon and Iran and Russia, and do you perceive this war growing, or is it going to end with eradicating Hamas out of Gaza?
Right now, the goals of this war have been hammered in by the Prime Minister and the Minister of Defense pretty much every day. And everybody can clearly state them. They are to eradicate the Hamas's ability to ever again do any kind of terror. They say that in a way that is a little bit before kill everybody who has anything to do with Hamas, but that is pretty much what we're talking about.
Okay, wait a minute. Say that one more time.
The Hamas is the de facto and de jure leaders government of the Gaza Strip.
Right.
But they are in parallel a horrific ISIS-like terror organization. So with all due respect to their so-called responsibility to make sure that the garbage gets collected, they're not doing anything like that. They're doing the opposite of what a responsible government should do. They're taking any money that they get and they're putting it into ways to murder Jews, ways to fight against Israel, ways to get more bombs and more missiles that they can aim at Israel. So even though, because of the pressure, international pressure from the United States, not to do something like that, we're as one in Israel, we are all for totally eradicating the Hamas. And we're doing that from the north to the south. The Gaza Strip is a strip of land. It's only about, I don't know, 7 miles wide and about 30 miles long. So right now, the northern part of the Gaza Strip is separated from the southern part. Over 1 million Palestinians have been escorted by the IDF towards the southern part of the Gaza Strip, and the northern part, where the city of Gaza is being pummeled door to door and tunnel to tunnel by the IDF until there is going to be no more tunnels and no more Hamas terrorists in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. And then they're going to go start working on the southern strip, the southern part of the strip. I don't know exactly how they're going to do that. Pardon me?
So kind of closing in on them.
Exactly. Now, the problem, of course, is that on the one hand, you have, I don't know, 5,000, 50,000 terrorists, and you have about 1 million non-terrorists, civilians, which Israel does not want to kill. Believe me, if we wanted to kill them all, could have done it in one day. Obviously, that's what we're trying to not do. It's the Hamas that's trying to kill Palestinians because then they make it look like we killed them.
Right. See, and I this is something that I have been intimately involved with for a long time. And I've known that's why I chose for our event live that Hamas's Iron Dome is to put a baby on over their heads, because I've known that, before Israel takes any sort of action in response to something horrible that Hamas has done, they drop leaflets. Over the course of days, they drop leaflets warning civilians. But Hamas intentionally, and evidence is now finally starting to surface, that Hamas intentionally puts all of their weapons of war and destruction in civilian places like schools and hospitals, things that most people would never even conceive. And then they force the women and children up on the roofs where these things are housed, because once the Mossad and Israel finds out, then that's where they're going to target. They hide under the people, the innocent people, so then they stab you and can pretend to be the ones that are bleeding.
Yes.
And I've also known, like, many years ago, there were videos that came out of Gaza where the people themselves were protesting Hamas because Hamas was using the money rather than paying the electric, which, correct me if I'm wrong, Gaza receives their electricity from Israel.
Part of their electricity they get from Israel. There is electrical generators in the Gaza Strip, which they need fuel to run, and they get the fuel from Israel.
Right. And so the people were actually protesting Hamas because Hamas was not doing business properly.
Right.
They were more focused on their war efforts against the Zionists than they were on ensuring that the infrastructure and the needs of the people was being met. And so the electricity was getting turned off. So a lot of people in the West are not aware of the nuances of these things, but just because this has been such a passionate thing to me personally, I've followed it very closely. I
find it hard to Leah, I find it hard to fathom somebody who is against Israel yet is knowledgeable about what is going on and has a modicum of morality in their soul.
Right. And it's just like, even with some of the things that I deal with, you've got these people who they won't stand for the right thing because they're screaming for validation. Sure, there's errors on both sides. There always is. There's no perfect people. But in the grand scheme of things, you don't demonize the people who really are adamantly trying to do the right thing. And without the opposition, life would be good for everyone. So, okay, so you need validation to say, okay, so the good guy is really bad sometimes. But in doing that, you want to say the good guy is always bad. And I'm not going to get on board with that. And that's the big, I'm appalled at the amount of anti-Semitism that's being revealed throughout social media. I mean, here in the States, the Jewish Federation is saying that there's almost a 400% uptick of anti-Semitism since October the 7th. And some of that is coming from that dynamic that I don't know that I'm articulating well enough, but it's okay. So if you have to paint it good guys and bad guys, with Israel being the good guys and Hamas being the bad guys, simply because of their modus operandi, one goes about life this way and one goes about life that way. The overall core principles and values of Israel and Israelis is not to just kill people to get what they want.
Of course not.
or to make a political statement. But
Our
that
our
is
our
the MO
value,
of Hamas.
Israel's value is the sanctity of life. That is the number one value. And full stop. So anytime that we have to take a life, it's only to save more lives. Simple as that.
So what about the posturing of Iran right now? Explain to people who maybe are just now starting to come into awareness of the situation, how Iran carries out a proxy war, what a proxy war means, and what who all is in alignment with Iran in their proxy war against Israel.
In a
And
moment,
why this proxy war against Israel? I mean, you've got people who survived the Holocaust. So why is that relevant? And this is why I used to always tell Ari Fool, that the story of Gush Etzion and that movie that they made about Gush Etzion, that movie needs to be shown around the world, because that is the story of modern Israel. So again, what about Iran and its proxy war? Who are its proxies, and how do they manage to cast their flying monkeys? Like
well, let's welcome Susan. I hope that this is a friend of yours.
It is. She's definitely a friend.
Okay, so she figured out how to get in, even though she's having trouble connecting to the audio. But
she's also a veteran.
Very nice, very nice. Yeah, Susan, can you hear us? I'm afraid not. She'll maybe figure it out. You asked about the global question about Iran and its proxies. We've seen Iran. I think we're talking about close to 50 years, really. About 50 years ago, the Ayatollahs took over Iran, turned Iran into a horrific, anti-democratic country, and a terror organizing and supporting country all over the world. And I think they have joined on. They haven't only joined on to hopped on the bandwagon, but they are leading the bandwagon of anti-Semitism, a horrific, unfathomable feeling that we just have to kill all the Jews.
What do you suppose drives that?
It's not something that I usually talk about and can really understand, but that is what looks like happening. And so you have all the other bad people, North Korea, Lebanon, Syria, obviously Hamas, all over the place, just going crazy about this and just saying we want to kill the Jews also, and ultimately we want to destroy the West. I can't understand why they want to do that and why they think that's going to be something good for the world. Maybe people have said it's because of the Islam, Muslim, the radical Muslim understanding of the end times. Okay, so that's possible. You'll have to interview people who are more experts about that than I. But we've been trying to convince the United States and the rest of the world. Much of the rest of the world is already fallen. It's not something that can be dealt with anymore. But the United States has to recognize that Iran is the enemy. We, on the more conservative side, we recognize that. Will more Democrats start realizing that now? I don't know. I'm afraid not.
Yeah, I saw a headline where President Biden, it looked like he was thinking about releasing another 10 million or 10 billion rather to Iran. Right now, during all of this.
I
So
cannot
explain to
explain
people
that.
how Iran will take that money and funnel it to these terrorist regimes throughout the Middle East.
1 second. I'm sorry, could you repeat your question?
Um, Explain how Iran will take the money that the United States is releasing and funnel it to terrorist organizations through the Middle East, and how do they do their business?
Oh, come on. I don't know exactly how that's done. If I knew, then I would stop it. But we're talking about all the ways that the terrorists move money around in fake bank accounts and in suitcases full of cash. And Israel obviously tries its best to keep that from happening, but somehow it happens. I have no more comment on that.
So Susan says she can't hear.
Right.
Everybody's having technical difficulties today.
Okay. Well, she'll just keep on watching it over there. And really, we've been going now for about 45 minutes.
Oh, wow.
So I think that I would just like to conclude this recording that I wasn't introduced. I've been in Israel for about 45 years now. I made Aliyah in 1978, so that's about 45 years ago. And I live now, as I mentioned earlier in this program, near Hebron. And I have a website called root-source.com, which is an opportunity for Christians who want to have a better connection with Israelis, with Jews, with the Torah, can engage with we have about 24 teachers over there. So check out the website. And you all can also reach out to me. If you're coming to this through Leah, then ask her how to contact me, or just find me on Facebook, Gidon Ariel, and I'll be happy to have one-on-ones like this with you as well.
And how can the viewers support you all with what you're going through right now?
We're about actually, Root Source is about to launch a campaign for people who want to help Israel, that will be able to help the soldiers, will be able to help the communities that are in danger, and be able to help the families of the soldiers. Also, they are deserving of support. So we will be launching that campaign, I think, on Tuesday. But reach out to me and I'll be able to give you the link early on.
All right, Gidon, I appreciate your time. At some point I'm gonna have to figure out how to make that Facebook Live work.
We'll figure it out. We'll
So,
practice first.
all right. Well, you have a good rest of your evening, get a good night's sleep, and we'll circle back and do this again soon.
So Darabah, thank you very much, Leah. And thank you and your other American friends who are supportive of Israel at this time.
All right, Gidon. Shalom.
Shalom.